Welcome to a new episode of Let's Draw Pokemon. Today we're going to be drawing the Kanto Fire Starter, Charmander. So as you can see, Charmander starts off with a bit of an egg-shaped head. He's composed of fairly simple shapes. Mostly your circles, some cylinders with arms, and his legs are like stubby little eggs. So I'm drawing a rounded body, reminiscent of an egg, somewhat. And then I'm drawing in the little circular legs, drawing in his little feet. I'm not worrying too much about the details like usual. Just trying to get the big, basic, overall shape built out. Focusing on the silhouette of Charmander before I go into his details. Details would be things like his claws, teeth, detailing on the eyes, or the little flame on his tail. We want to focus on getting the full picture of him to start. So I'm just working on his arm here, making sure everything's in proportion to everything else. So adding in the second arm. They're very rounded in shape, a little cylindrical. They tend to have a larger base from the body, and then they taper out a little bit. His fingers on his hands are fairly simple. They're just little triangular shapes that give you a hint of finger action. Nothing too complicated. And now we're just drawing in the tail, which you would see it as a very deformed cone in a sense. Always focusing on our shapes and how we can utilize them to draw out the form. And so now that we have the basic overall body formed, we're focusing on details. So things like the teeth here are just little stubs. They're just small details that really give life to Charmander and make him pop out from the page. You have his little nostrils. Another thing you can do while you're starting to detail is to define the forms a little more strongly. Of course, his head is egg-shaped, but it's not a perfect egg shape. It has little protrusions and stuff like that. If you think about your own face, whenever it moves around, it starts doing things. It doesn't stay static, and you have to think about that whenever you're designing your characters too. So we're just going to add in the little details. Continue adding them in, defining the shapes more. It's really starting to come out and look like Charmander. And while you're doing this, don't be afraid to tweak areas. If something's not looking quite right, or if the proportions are off, or eyes are out of alignment, or anything like that, now's the stage where you go and change all that. It's where you want to get your base form correct, so it's ready to be inked, and then move into coloring. So once you have that, all the forms worked out, you start adding in some details like on the eyes. You're almost at your finished sketch. Of course, the eye shapes are just composed of ovals and circles and stuff like that. They're for fairly basic shapes. And thinking of your characters in terms of shapes will let you draw practically anything. It doesn't just have to be Pokemon, it can be any kind of creature or character. Just start with the basic shapes. Give your character a body, head, appendages, or whatever it happens to be. And from there you just go and flesh it out. Start with the big shapes. Get everything in proportion and looking correct to you, and then go into your details. Just like Charmander. So we're almost finished the sketch. We're just adding in the claws on the feet, and then we'll be all ready and set to go inking. Like usual, we're just lightening the sketch in Photoshop on that layer, making a new layer, and starting in on inking. I'm just using the brush tool. There's many different ways you can ink things. You use the pen tool, you use the brush. You may even be at home using markers or pens, anything like that. You just have to pick a medium that works for you and that you feel comfortable using. And the important thing is to try and keep your lines nice, crisp, and clean whenever you're designing characters like these in this kind of style. And like with everything, as long as your sketch is nice and solid, everything's in proportion, all you're doing is essentially tracing your sketch out. Okay, so I already picked the palette like usual, so I'm just filling it in with the fill bucket, getting it all ready for shading, of course. So first things first, we're just starting off with the teeth and the claws, the eyes, all those little white areas that need a little attention. Then I'm going into stuff like the underbelly. So now that we have a rough idea of the underbelly, we're going on to the actual skin. Charmander is composed of a lot of fairly simple looking forms, but you could add some very interesting, not too complex, but very dynamic shadows that look quite interesting on him. Because his body is composed of very rounded shapes. You get the one, you have the sides that hold a lot of shadow, that are encased in a bit of darkness. It gives a very strong 3D form to the figure, so you know that it's not just he's not a flat figure, he's composed of rounded shapes. And then something that's a bit new that we haven't really played around with before is the fire on his tail. Fire is pretty much just as complicated as you make it out to be. And usually just whenever you're doing simple character designs like this, you just stick to two colors and just blend them up a bit. And now I'm just adding in some highlights to Charmander's skin. Again, he's composed of a lot of rounded shapes, so you could just put little speculars, which are just little rounded highlighted accents. Journey. Another thing you might want to do whenever you're doing fire is to not keep it black, but if you're using Photoshop, for instance, or another program, you can go and color the outline of the fire with a different color. And so I used like a brownish red orange. I went and colored in that, so it looks kind of cool. And now I'm just adding some more details to the tail with the yellow color I had selected, making it a little more crisp and clear, and just adding some highlights into the eyes and stuff like that. So that's Charmander. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day.